Hey everyone! Today on the plastic canvas we're painting the dragon miniature from Clank Legacy by Direwolf Games. Hey everyone, Matt here from the Plastic Canvas and welcome to the first and only video in this Clank Legacy series. And today we are painting the dragon miniature. This is the marker that shows how many cubes or clank will be removed from the bag when the dragon is disturbed. Now we're going to be playing Clank Legacy soon, and from everything that we've seen on the game, all of the reviews, this looks like a game that we are going to absolutely love the pants off, so this game definitely needs to be painted before we start. And the dragon miniature here is the only one that I haven't painted yet. I painted the 4 characters that you can play as a while ago, and they appeared in the Anyone Can Paint miniature series. I don't have individual videos for them, so if you want to see them, you can sort of check them out along the way in that series. But this is the last guy to be painted, and then we're ready to start playing. So as a starting point, I just laid down a Zenithal Prime, so I hit it with black all over, then grey from a fairly high angle, then white from directly above. This is partly so that I can get an idea of the volumes of the miniature, so that I know where the brightest highlights and deeper shadows need to be, but also, as you can see, I'm base coating with my airbrush, and the paint naturally comes out of the airbrush thinner than with a brush, and so this will be able to make use of those different tones just to get some subtle highlighting and shading straight through with the base coat stage, so that I don't need to do quite as much of that later on. So to also get some simple highlighting and shading in the base coating, I'm essentially doing a Zenithal base coat. So as you can see here with this fleshy part on the chest of the dragon, I started with earth brown, which is one of my medium browns, I guess. That's a good colour as the shadow for the skin tone. And then hitting from a bit of a higher angle with the tan skin, and then just finishing here with the fair skin from a very, very high angle, just to start to get a shift from the highlights through to the shadows, but I haven't had to use the brush here at all to start to get these tones. And in the chest area there of the dragon, you can see it's got that kind of lobster kind of texture. And so you can see we've already got some shadow lines underneath each of those separate parts. It sticks out where the earth brown is still showing, but the tan skin and the fair skin, by being hit from a higher angle, didn't touch that underneath section, and so we've got that shadow going there already. And so now I'm building up the greens on the scaly part on the back and the head of the dragon. I'm using green to match the dragon symbol on the bag that all of the cubes go into. So I'm just starting with peacock green here, which is my darkest green, hitting this all over, and then I'll use viper green, which comes up next. That'll be hit from a fairly high angle, so this will allow some of the peacock green to stay showing underneath. And then as a final stage, I then use pale green from directly above, and that'll do the highlighting. So then again, we'll have that transition from the pale green for the highlights through to the peacock green with the shadows, but by hitting each tone from a higher angle than the previous one, it allows some of the previous tone to show through, especially that peacock green, which will be showing on the underside of each of those scaly, spiky parts, because these lighter tones don't hit that area at all. So here I'm just doing a quick little bit of touching up where the green meets the skin tone, where I didn't quite have the tape in exactly the right spot, but all I'm doing here is just as close as possible matching the skin tone that's in that particular area, just neatening that line up so that there isn't any overlap or a bit of a messy looking line going on. So here I'm just starting to highlight the separate sections of the dragon's chest, and the overall look that I'm going for with this dragon is definitely more of a cartoony sort of feel to kind of match the vibe, I suppose, of the game, and also the artwork. I'm definitely not going for a realistic look here. So obviously in reality, the highlighting and the shading here for these separate parts wouldn't be quite as defined as what it is here, because I'm just basically doing some edge highlighting, but I'm just going for a high contrast look here where each of these separate sections are really, really defined. So you'll see at first I went back with the earth brown and I just redefined the shadow line underneath the ridges, and then by going to the fair skin, then just did that edge highlighter, just creates that real good bit of contrast, really makes each of those separate sections stand out, but also gives it that bit of a cartoony sort of look. And then just going back with the earth brown again, just painting in each of those little scratch marks. Here for these ones that are more lower down and in a bit more shadow, I've mixed a little bit of black in just to deepen the color a little bit. And then here I'm just going back to the fair skin just for that higher contrast, and then just running this along sort of really the under edge of each of these, just to make it look like the bottom edge of each chunk that's been taken out is catching some light, and just making those chunks look a bit deeper than what they initially did. And with the highlighting and shading here for the scaly green parts of the dragon, I'm doing this in the exact same way as the fleshy part on the chest. So I'm still going for that edge highlighting, higher contrast, cartoony sort of look. So you can see here I've gone back to the pale green, which was the final green that I used in my airbrush when base coating. And so I'm just edge highlighting each of these scaly sections. This just really defines each of them, makes the edges of each of them really stand out, and that crisp line just gets a good bit of contrast just to get that nice cartoony look that I'm going for. And then what I'll do here in a minute is I'll go back to the peacock green, which was the darkest green that I used, a little bit of black mixed in there, and then just putting this into each of the chunks that have been taken out, just the exact same way as what I did on the fleshy part. Then I'll go back to the pale green and highlight the under edge of each of them, again, just to make them look really deep and just to get that contrast. So for the highlighting of the head, which I'm starting to do here, I go back to more the typical way that I do my highlighting, because I don't have those real sharp, crisp lines that there are on the scaly parts on the back. So I'm not just edge highlighting these, so I'm doing more blending here. But usually when I highlight and shade, I'll layer it up, so use some gradually lighter tones, but here I've just gone straight to the pale green, that brightest green, and then just putting it down where I think the light would be hitting the most, and then just feathering the edge out towards the direction of the shadows, and that's all I'm doing here. So I'm still trying to get that high contrast cartoony look, but I'm just not doing as much edge highlighting as what I have in the other parts. So yeah, you can see here I'm just laying it down where I think the light would be hitting each particular part the most, and then feathering the edge out towards where the shadows would be. Now you can do that just by cleaning the bristles off in your water so that you don't have much paint on the bristles, but they are a little bit damp. I'm a brush licker, so I use my mouth for that, but it's just feathering the edge out just so that it gradually becomes thinner and thinner and thinner, which will allow more and more and more of the tone underneath to show through, and that just helps to create a nice smooth blend. A couple of spots like here around where that ear kind of sort of shape meets the horn, or where those parts are jutting out where the teeth are underneath, they just get more of an edge highlight style, but for the most part it is blending. And then here, just because I wanted to boost that contrast a little bit more, I've mixed in a little bit of yellow just to lighten it off that little bit and add a little bit more luminosity, I suppose would be the word. So here it's just the uppermost parts of each section that are going to be getting the most amount of light. This is thinned a little bit so that the tones from underneath will still show through a bit. Just putting it down where I think the light would be hitting the most, and then again just gradually feathering it out just so that it blends nicely into the previous tone. So this is just to brighten the top of the head a bit more, draw the attention here. I do this, I don't think I got it on camera, but I do it a bit on top of the top 3 scale spiky bits on the dragon's back, but it's all just the exact same process. So yeah, just putting this little bit of yellow mixed in where the light would be hitting the most, feathering it out just to boost that contrast a little bit more there. So here I'm just starting to lay down the base tone for the teeth. So what I like to do when painting teeth, just to give them a bit of detail and texture, is to lay down a darker colour initially, and then starting at the tip of the tooth, using then a lighter colour is to paint some striations or just some lines from the tip in the direction towards the gum, but don't let the meat have a gap in between, and then it just creates like the effect of some ridges. Because these teeth though are quite small, I'm just doing a really basic version of that technique. So I just started with that aged bone there. Now I'm putting the sepia wash over the top just to darken them, and then when I come back to continue on with them, I'll further explain how I'm painting there, just what I'm doing. Now we're getting on to painting the horns. Now what I wanted to do with the horns was to create a strong contrast between the horns and the green scaly parts of the dragon, which is really going to boost the intensity of that green, because that's the main focal point of this miniature. That's what I want to stand out, and these horns are going to be a great way of boosting that intensity. So you can see I've just laid down a base of Stormy Grey. That's because I'm going to be doing a wet blend from black where the horns meet the body of the dragon, through to the Stormy Grey in the middle, through to then a lighter grey at the tip. Now the reason why I laid down that Stormy Grey first instead of just going straight to doing the wet blending is because, as we know, paint that you lay down is affected by the paint that's underneath. And if I did the wet blending from black to the dark grey to the lighter grey over the top of the green that was already there, anywhere in those blends where it was a little bit thinner, that green would have been showing through, and then I would have had to completely redo the blend again as a second coat. But by having the Stormy Grey as a base, it's going to help those blends appear smoother, because I'm going to be using greys over the top of grey. I'm able to do this in one single coat instead of having to go back a second time to cover up the colours that are coming through underneath. Now when wet blending, the two most important things that I found is, first of all, to make sure that your brush strokes are happening in a direction that is perpendicular to the actual blend itself. So in this case, the blend is happening from the base of the horn through to the tip of the horn. So as you can see just there, my brush strokes are running across the horn, which is perpendicular to the direction of the blend. That really helps you to get a nice smooth blend, because it avoids ending up with streaks. Because if you were moving your brush in the direction of the blend, so in this case if I was moving the brush from the base of the horn through to the tip of the horn, I'm just going to end up with streaky black lines as I'm dragging the black up through the grey, but running perpendicular to the blend just keeps it nice and smooth. The other thing that I always try and do as much as possible is to blend from the lighter colour through to the darker colour. So like you saw there, I was blending from the light grey through to the dark grey, because the darker colour overpowers the lighter colour so much more. If you blend from the dark colour through to the light colour, it's going to take a much greater distance to end up with a nice smooth blend, because say I went from the black through to the dark grey, the black is just going to keep overpowering the dark grey for a long time, and you're going to end up with lots of black and only a little bit of grey. Whereas by blending from the dark grey through to the black, the blend will happen over a much shorter distance. Now, as you saw when I was doing it, sometimes I was going a little bit back and forth, going from the black to the dark grey or the dark grey through to the light grey. It's all just about just doing what you need to just to get that blend as smooth as possible. At first, it can be a little bit tricky just because you are kind of reacting to how the different tones are mixing together to try and get it as smooth as possible, but over time it becomes quite a really, really effective and fun technique to do. But yeah, those are just those two main things that I try and do as much as possible because I do find that they really help with getting that nice smooth blend. Now here I'm just painting the chunks that have been taken out of the horns, and I did them in the exact same way as the chunks that have been taken out of the body. So I just used black to fill in each of the chunks for the shadow, and then I went to the cloudy grey, which was the brightest grey that I used in that wet blending, just to highlight the underside. Now what I'm doing here is I've gone to misty grey, which is my lightest grey, just to highlight the underside of the chunks that are up the top parts of the horn, and as you can see there, I didn't like how it looked. It was way too bright. It stood out. It looked a bit wrong. So I just went back to my cloudy grey, which again was the lightest grey that I used in the wet blend, and I just repainted in that edge just to bring the darkness down a little bit. And now we're just getting into doing the detailing on the teeth. So yeah, earlier I base coated it with aged brown and then did a sepia wash over the top just to darken it so that when I do the ridges or the striations, there's enough contrast there that detailing stands out. So what I'm doing here is I've just gone back to the aged bone, which I base coated with, and I'm just making the tips of the teeth brighter. So with the really small teeth, it's just basically just a dab of the aged bone on the tip of each one just to make the tip appear brighter. But with the bigger teeth at the front, that's where I painted those striations or those straight lines starting from the tip running towards the gum. But as they get closer towards the gum, they just spread apart a little bit so that you then have sort of some bright lines where the light's catching those ridges, and then also some darker lines where they would be in shadow. And now I'm just using polished bone, which is a brighter bone color, just right on the tip of each tooth, just to boost that contrast a little bit more. With the bigger teeth at the front, I am going back over those striations a bit, but only a short distance, so that you then have the tips really bright with the polished bone, through to then the aged bone, and then the sepia wash is then showing through right near the gums, just to give a bit of detailing. So from here, all there is to do is to paint the glowing eyes of the dragon, which I just do by using different shades of purple, then paint the base black, which, like the horns, will help the green scaly parts really pop, which is that main focal point for this mini, and then our dragon is done. So thank you very, very much for checking out another one of my videos. I really do hope you enjoyed it and that you found something useful to take away and use in your own painting. If you did enjoy it, please do give it a thumbs up, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet to stay up to date with future videos as they keep coming out. Also, stop by the Twitter and Instagram accounts that I have set up for this channel, where you can see what I'm painting at the moment, and so what videos are going to be coming out in the future. And it'd be awesome if there's anything that you take away from my videos, if you'd be able to post them to there, tag me in it so I can see how you're using my videos to help your painting. But until next time, this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas, signing out. Happy painting, everyone. Cheers.